As it stands, David Hedison is Felix Leiter, much older than Bond, and for some reason just way too intense. The film does what it can to imply a close relationship between Bond and Felix Leiter, and they also suggest that Bond is very close with Felix's bride Della. Now admit it, you thought Priscilla Barnes was an odd casting choice too. Della's character is supposed to be the catalyst. Her murder is Bond's breaking point. So why cast somebody who is best known for a lighthearted comedy? And is it me, or do Bond and Della seem way too close? Bordering on inappropriate. But of course, the whole event is supposed to remind us that Bond himself was once married and that it didn't end too well. I think I've just about exhausted the point about Felix Leiter and Bond's motivation. It's not that I can't get on board with the idea, it's just that I think that better writing and better casting would have really pulled me in. Anyway, Della is murdered, Felix is maimed, Bond snaps and seeks revenge. A big leap of faith in my book, but let's move on to the other characters. One of the reasons that I don't find this film very watchable is that James Bond himself just isn't very likable. I understand that this is a revenge story, and this time around Bond is all business, but I just don't enjoy this constant brooding, serious tone. Now don't get me wrong, I think Timothy Dalton is an excellent James Bond, and he's the closest to Fleming's James Bond. And while Dalton has a pretty intense presence, I thought they softened him up just right for The Living Daylights. He was charismatic, but could still show great intensity. And he's also human and emotional, so it's easier to get drawn into the story. But in License to Kill, they just pulled out all the stops and made Dalton just way too severe. With his slick back hair and those deep pointed sideburns, now he just looks like a crazed Dracula. And I also don't like that Bond is constantly telling people to go away.
I work better alone.
Again, it's just more of this lone samurai tale that they're shooting for, but I just don't think it works for Bond. And it doesn't even work for this particular story. No matter how valuable people keep proving themselves to be, he's constantly telling them to go home.
Thanks for everything. Your job's finished. This is no place for you, Q. Go home. Your job's done. Take Q and fly out of here now. Now go. I'll see you back in London. This is where you leave. Take the plane. I'll see you both in Miami.
After a while, this starts to get pretty annoying. These are important characters, so you know they're not going anywhere. The two Bond girls have to be the most lackluster in the whole franchise.
I got the job done.
I wouldn't say they're the worst, but they're definitely the most bland and forgettable. I can't tell if it's the acting, or just poor writing and the total lack of any solid direction, but I really think that these are two of the weakest performances in the whole series. And as far as romantic interests go, the relationships feel really forced, and the romantic and sexual tension is usually shattered before it even has a chance to be explored. Carrie Lowell plays Pam Bouvier, who is listed on all the materials as an ex-CIA agent, but unless I missed it, I never hear that mentioned in the film.
I was an army pilot!
I can never really get a handle on this character. One minute she's tough and not to be trifled with, the next minute she's a demure little flower with all the insecurities and jealousy of a junior varsity cheerleader.
I love James so much.
Blech. And the film makes another mistake by dismissing any romantic tension and serving up one of the fastest seductions ever. Bond and Pam meet in the bar, get into the bar fight, escape, they argue, and then they make out and go to bed? As my buddy Scott points out, this is just wrong as it completely breaks the tension. What a missed opportunity this was for great conflict and genuine romantic build-up. There are some situations where jumping right into the relationship works and creates the dynamic that the story requires. But the best Bond romance is usually blossomed out of difficult or star-crossed situations, and this story seemed ideal for this type of intrigue. But instead, any possibility for interesting tension is lost almost immediately. And since Bond and Pam have now already gone to bed together, there's a few subsequent scenes that seem just sort of odd. In the very next scene after they've gone to bed, the two arrive at the hotel and Bond slaps a big stack of cash in her hand and sends her home. That's pretty cold under the circumstances, even for James Bond. He might as well have left her some cab fare on the nightstand. Then there's the scene later when Pam makes him sleep in the second bedroom with Q.
Sweet dreams, Mr. Bond.
Now she's playing hard to get? Since he's already been with Bond, I'm not sure why this happens. Are they fighting? Is she no longer interested? Otherwise, this would have been a great little moment. But again, any genuine romantic tension between the two has already been done away with, and it's a shame. Talisa Soto is relatively convincing as Sanchez's kept woman Lupe, but the implied relationship with Bond again feels really forced.
James, don't go. I'm scared. What's gonna happen to us?
Us? Do I really have to recount their relationship up until this point?
You need help?
No, take your hands off me. Please go. If they find you, you will both be killed.
Why would she be killed? When we meet Lupe again, she's instantly become Bond's ally. Now I can accept the idea that she doesn't like Sanchez much either, so maybe she feels a little camaraderie with Bond. Or maybe she's just into the bad boys. Or maybe she sees Bond as her ticket out of a bad situation. But if that's the case, then why did she tell him to forget about going after Sanchez and leave?
You should walk straight out of here, go to the airport, and never come back.
Which brings us back to...
I'm scared. What's gonna happen to us?
It's right about now that I'm starting to feel like I missed something along the way. All in all, she's not a bad character, but she definitely could have been handled a little bit better. And by the way, her Spanish accent is not exactly convincing.
You loco?
I do find it interesting, though, that this film marks the beginning of the current tradition of the dual Bond girls, where the secondary Bond girl has almost as much prominence as the primary Bond girl, almost as if Bond is really paired with two women. In the past, there were always minor flings, which were only precursors to the real Bond girl of the film. But in License to Kill, the two women seem to be battling for Bond's attention, almost as if they're battling for top billing. This trend seems to have kept on all the way through till today. Even the posters and promo shots almost always have Bond being flanked by two women. It's good to be Bond. So, what about the regular cast of characters? Well, since the plot of this film is so far removed from what we know of a James Bond story, the reoccurring characters either get very little screen time or an unwarranted amount of screen time. Moneypenny is quickly dismissed, making this probably her shortest appearance of any Bond film. The introduction to M at the Hemingway house is a very good one. It's got some great build-up, the ringing bell, the music cues, and the cats are reminiscent of another mysterious character. But then as he turns around, the camera angle makes him look short, which sort of kills the impact for me. And I'm sure we'll agree that it's tough to know what to make of this line here.
Don't shoot too many people!
Is that to imply that he really would have let Bond get shot if there weren't too many people? Or do you think M is protecting Bond, and he just said that to make the guy stop shooting? Tough to know for sure, and I'm not really sure which one I'd like more. So, is there anyone I've missed? As you're probably guessing, I've got some big problems with the treatment of this character. But before I delve into this issue, let me touch on some other issues I've got with the film's conflicting tone. I've got two issues with the tone of this film. One is relatively minor, but the other is glaring. The first is the obvious attempt early on to style the film after the popular 80s action movies of the time. What's the expression? If you can't beat 'em, join 'em. A few of the supporting actors had previously appeared in films like Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours, and Die Hard. I can't recall ever seeing Bond intentionally without a sidearm, even for social occasions. But here, Bond is conveniently handed a familiar-looking 9mm Beretta, the weapon of choice of Martin Riggs and John McClane. For the musical score, John Barry is out and Michael Kamen is in. Kamen, who had just done the scores for Lethal Weapon and Die Hard. And his score for License to Kill is pretty tough to differentiate. But for me, there's no better example of the overlapping problems of overall tone and a character's motivation than the treatment of this character right here.
Q, what the hell are you doing here?
What the hell is Q doing here? If I really wanted to make the case for the most bizarre transformation of any single character, Q's 180-degree turnaround would win first prize. I know I don't even need to belabor this point.
I never joke about my work, 007.
Even a casual James Bond fan knows that Q has always been straight-laced, prudish, does everything by the book, and I don't have to tell you that he finds this business of equipping Bond in the field, on the run as it were, highly irregular.
I must say, I find this business of equipping you in the field, on the run as it were, highly irregular.
But in License to Kill, after Bond has just resigned from the Secret Service, beat up a few other agents, set out to murder a drug dealer against the wishes of the British government, Q decides this would be the perfect opportunity to use his vacation time to fly down to Isthmus for a little holiday with Bond and bringing along a few gadgets that he lifted from MI6 to equip Bond with whatever he needs to murder Sanchez. And he never seems the slightest bit concerned that he might be jeopardizing his own career in the doing. So let's face it, this has got to be one of the most dramatic reversals of any character in cinema history. Well, almost. So why does Q do such a complete turnaround? Because to stick with the lone samurai anti-hero formula, we need an overeager sidekick who doesn't take no for an answer. And rather than creating a new, interesting character who would share a common goal and assist Bond, they just completely rewrite Q's character and drop him into the story. Now the thing is, I absolutely love Q. I love seeing him pop up where he doesn't belong, and I especially love the times where we see him as the cavalry, as if Bond has run out of allies and Q is forced to go above and beyond and step up to the responsibility. That's when he's pushed beyond his usual restrained self, but in a way that's authentic and positive. But in License to Kill, I just can't see Q stepping up to the job of helping Bond to murder Sanchez against the will of MI6, risking his own career. I realize that I might be taking this point a little bit too seriously, but as a fan, I find the unfaithful treatment of Q to be a bit of a betrayal. And aside from the drastic change in character, using Q as comedy relief is in direct contrast with the darker, grittier tone of the film. Or rather, the darker, grittier tone we were originally promised. What happened to the solemn tale of revenge we were initially set up for? It feels like the film suddenly loses its nerve, and Q is injected into the story as a last-minute scramble to lighten the mood. To make matters worse, the gadgets have essentially become prop comedy.
Dentonite toothpaste.
Dentonite toothpaste? What is this, wacky packages?
Explosive alarm clock. Guaranteed never to wake up anybody who uses it.
And now the gadgets come with punchlines? Who is he, Carrot Top?
I made this for Tiger Woods. It's a golf club so he can make some more cash while he's out there on the circuit. Okay, thanks for
So why does this bug me so much? Well, because it breaks the mood, it takes me out of the story, and it illustrates an overall lack of a consistent style. It's simply a distraction from what should have been a fairly serious, down-to-earth tone. Take this example. In The Living Daylights, Bond's assignment as an assassin requires him to use a pretty intense-looking Walther sniper rifle. Now that's a serious gun. But in the similar scene in License to Kill, the realistic sniper rifle now becomes a camera gun with other matching toys to go with it. So instead of getting more serious, the scene looks more comic book. And this is also a good example of how things are happening that just don't make any sense. Such as, what was Bond's plan if Q hadn't shown up? We see him checking out the view from Sanchez's office, but what would he have done if Q hadn't appeared at the last second with everything he needed? I think a better film would have required Bond to make some new contacts to aid and equip him to take out Sanchez. And what's the point of the signature gun as a gadget anyway? It's a gun that looks like a camera, so it would hide the fact that it's really a gun if someone were to find it. Fair enough. But Bond carries it around in a gift box that's big enough to hold a real gun anyway, and when you open the box, it holds the gun along with the rest of the pieces, like a scope, the barrel, ammunition, etc. So would anyone not realize that this is actually a weapon? Would this ever make it through airport security? Okay, so much for camouflage. Are there any other helpful aspects of this gadget?
No. Nobody can use the gun but you.
Okay, so the weapon can only be fired by Bond. And why would that be helpful? Oh, in case ninjas pop up out of nowhere and try to shoot you with your own gun. Okay, why would the ninja try to shoot Bond? Unless I'm misreading the scene, it seems to me like they're trying to take him out alive to question him. Otherwise, if they wanted to kill him, wouldn't they have just shot him already? You mean to tell me that they really wanted to kill Bond, but they just couldn't find a gun? So their plan was to get Bond's gun from him so they can shoot him with it? What about a throwing star or some nunchucks? They're flipping ninjas for crying out loud. And to make matters worse, when they force the gun into Bond's hand, it now links him to the crime. Whoops, didn't think about that problem. So the whole gimmick feels forced and just totally illogical. So this shift from dark realism to gimmicks and comedy just doesn't work for me. It takes me out of the mood and creates a lot of situations that don't make any sense. Too many times I'm watching and thinking to myself, wait, why is this happening? And it's not just the presence of Q and his comical gadgets that don't stand to reason. The film is riddled with confusing or illogical situations that just don't work, and these really large flaws in logic really keep me from getting absorbed into the story. So let's take a look at a few examples.